Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Ask Sharifah Videocast. I haven't done too many lately, but when I find something or someone that interests me, I definitely want to share them and what they do with you. And that's exactly what today's guest did. When I found out about her and her business, I was like, tell me more. Today we have Heather Dominick. She is both highly sensitive and highly successful. For more than a decade, she has trained and mentored highly sensitive entrepreneurs and leaders so they are able to work less while making more. Definitely someone I want to meet. I want to introduce you to Heather Dominick. How you doing today, Heather?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
I am as well. I'm looking forward to having it. Now, I wanted to start off the conversation by saying when you say highly sensitive, I remember growing up as a kid,
Mm.
and that to a certain extent was a negative, because people would always say to me, "Oh, you are too sensitive. You are so sensitive."
Yes.
So whenever I hear the word sensitive, it's like, "Oh, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?"
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we're starting here. I heard the same thing growing up, so I totally get it. And let me just say that highly sensitive or a highly sensitive person is not a phrase that's coined by me. It actually comes out of research from the mid 1990s. There's one woman in particular who's most known for the research, but she's far from the only researcher, and her name is Dr. Elaine Aron. She wrote the book, The Highly Sensitive Person. And in short, what I'll say is that when you are a highly sensitive person, this is actually something that's physiological. It points to how your nervous system processes stimulation. There's only 20% of us in the global population who are highly sensitive. But for those of us who are, we literally take in a higher degree of stimulation than someone who's not highly sensitive. So that could be like sight, smell, sound, touch, but also information, energy, emotions, and it really impacts how you process the world.
Wow, 20%. That seems like a very small number.
Right.
And I mean, 20%. That seems relatively low.
It is. It absolutely is. And so, what tends to happen for those of us who are highly sensitive and don't know that we're highly sensitive, and I definitely didn't learn that I was highly sensitive until I was already in my 30s. I had already started my business, I had been self employed for about 8 years at that time. When we don't know that we're highly sensitive, we can often feel like there's something wrong with us because there's only 20% of us. And just like you already shared, and again, me too, people who aren't highly sensitive, they just don't get it. So if you're having a different experience as a highly sensitive person, you probably grew up hearing things like, stop being so sensitive. And meanwhile, it's literally just how your nervous system is processing information.
Oh, wow. So how do you know you're highly sensitive as opposed to something else like over emotional or something of that nature? Some people say, "Oh, I'm an empath," but that means they're highly sensitive.
Such a great question. So I really like to think of it as kind of like a spectrum, right? And not really a spectrum, but let's say like a range. So you might have somebody, say, for example, who is ADD or ADHD. That's also connected to how the nervous system processes. When it comes to like being over emotional, that's a different experience than what's actually happening physiologically. So, Dr. Erin, who I mentioned, she created an assessment that's easy to take, easy to find online, helps you to identify if you're a highly sensitive person. And then I've taken her work and I've expanded on it and created an assessment that if you're a person who desires to be self employed or desires to really lead either in your work or in your life, I also have an assessment that helps you to understand, oh, wait, what's going on? Am I highly sensitive? And not just am I highly sensitive, but the assessment that I've created is, am I somewhat? Am I super, or am I super uber highly sensitive? And then how to work with it within the day to day of, again, being in business, running an organization or just, showing up as a leader for your family.
I love it. I love the whole Uber. I just love the super Uber, the whole idea of it. But I mean, does it really make a difference? Like if you're super Uber, does that make you mean that you're going to make that much more money? Or if you're a lot less, that means that you're not going to make any money? Like what do the ranges mean?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I so appreciate this question because I put so much work into the identification of somewhat super or super Uber. And I'll just out myself and say that I am a super Uber, highly
I can
sensitive.
tell. I think I am too, though. And if not, I want to be. But I guess I have to go in and take the assessment to confirm that I am super Uber. But I know I'm 47. My entire life, especially my mom, is like, you are just too sensitive.
Yes.
I'm sensitive about everything. So what's the different levels?
Yes. So it's not so much like, oh, you will or you won't make more money, although I kind of wish it was. But really, it's more of like, oh, okay, so to what degree am I going to feel the impact of this overstimulation of the nervous system? And then what do I want to do to be able to not only manage it, but so much of the work that I do is about how to be proactive about it. So I can definitely say for myself, like learning that I was a highly sensitive person changed everything about how I went about being in business, how I arranged my schedule, the type of people that I worked with, how it is that I set up systems, how it is that I work with team. I mean, I could just go on and on. So understanding where you are on that range is like, oh, okay, I'm probably going to have to be a bit more proactive when it comes to these areas of overstimulation, for example, or I'm probably going to really be better off if I put some systems in place to get ahead of where this type of overstimulation might take me out. Those are some examples.
Oh, I love it. Do you have to take or put systems in place for working with and dealing with people? Because I'll tell you, and again, we've already confirmed, at least I've confirmed for myself that I'm a super Uber, highly sensitive person. But one of the areas where I see the most difficulties is handling employee issues.
Yes.
Like for instance, if you tell me anything, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Take the rest of the day off. Like it's very difficult for me not to feel what your situation, like I like if you're going through it, Heather, and this is your situation, your mom is sick or whatever it is, like I'm like, oh my God, like just take the week off. I know your mom needs you. How do you handle that? Or does that even come into play?
Oh my gosh, absolutely it comes into play. I really feel like you just nailed like one of like probably the best examples. And so this is where my work, I've identified what I refer to as the top 12 shadows of being a highly sensitive entrepreneur and leader, and then the top 12 strengths of being a highly sensitive entrepreneur and leader. So when we're in that shadow side of the nervous system and the nervous system overload, we will tend more towards that sympathy, right? Or a lot of what I hear you speaking about is what I refer to as the shadow of over responsibility, which really is like, oh, because I can feel something, that means I'm responsible for it. And what we want to do is we want to learn how to shift from that shadow into more of the strengths. And one of the strengths that we really possess is that we have a high level of empathy. So when you're able to start to train your nervous system to respond more in a strength, probably like let's just say a strength response versus a shadow response, then you're more easily able to access empathy in those types of situations that you just described, where you can really understand how the person is feeling, but you don't make yourself responsible for it. And that helps you to be able to, still be a deep feeler, but also to be able to make decisions and to, have, again, systems in place where the business needs to keep moving and running, right? Even though we all have, terrible things that are happening, right? And especially now in the world. So that's just, again, a great example and a beautiful demonstration of that shadow versus strength.
Oh wow. And how did you come up with all this? I know you started with the research of other people, but what
Yeah.
really intrigued you to say, I want to make this my business and offer to help other business owners?
Yeah, oh my God, that's such a good question. It's such a great question because it really just came from my own experience. So I think, as I had already mentioned, I had already been self employed for about 8 years when I discovered I was highly sensitive. And I discovered that I was highly sensitive because everything was falling apart, both
Is that
in
what it
me
is?
and around me. I had brought my business to a very financially successful place on paper. I had crossed the seven-figure mark for the first time, yet I was massively overwhelmed. I was overworked. I was experiencing massive health issues. And I really, really was questioning like everything that I was doing. And I was like, well, if this is what it takes to be successfully self-employed, like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I can't keep at it like this. And if I'm not doing this, then what am I going to do? And so it was really like a dark night of the soul. And that's what led me to Dr. Aaron and to learn for the first time. I had never even heard the phrase highly sensitive. But when I heard it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And I took the assessment and I didn't like it. I didn't like learning that I was highly sensitive. But once I learned more about what it actually really meant, then I started thinking, like, okay, I can still do what I'm doing, but I'm going to have to do it very differently. And that was really the beginning. And I was already working with some, amazing women at the time. Loved the coaching work that I was doing, and thought, like, just out of curiosity, let me just see if anybody else that I'm working with is also highly sensitive. And literally every client was highly sensitive. And because I'm a teacher at heart and I've just always been a teacher, that was a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, okay, I have to be able to share this with others so that they can have a better experience and don't have to go to that dark place that I went to. And that's just really how it all kind of kicked off.
I love it. I love it. What stood out to me the most about that journey was you said you were successful by all accounts. So the world is looking at you and say, Heather's successful. She's making the money. She's over seven figures. I work with a lot of people who operate nonprofit organizations. And over time, I began to see a trend where so many people pushed money away or pushed success away because for them it reeked of corporate America. And
Mm.
so they became what I believe was imbalanced, where instead of not doing anything and killing and cheating to get money, they went to, you could literally hand me the money and I'm still like, no, I don't want it. Did you find that to be true as well with highly sensitive people?
Yes. Oh my God. I really also appreciate that. That makes so much sense to me, that you're seeing that, because it really just speaks to that kind of either or mentality, right? Um, and I would say, yes, I absolutely see that. In my work, I've identified what I refer to as three coping mechanisms that, as highly sensitives, we tend to default to. There's the coping mechanism of pushing, which I am definitely a recovering pusher. It's what got me to that very dark place that I shared. Then there's the coping mechanism of hiding, and then the coping mechanism of combo plattering, which is you kind of flip flop back and forth between pushing and hiding. So when I hear you, I hear the coping mechanism of hiding, which
Okay.
is again kind of buying into that all or nothing, right? That either or mentality, which is either I'm going to have financial success and it's going to mean all of these negative things and it's going to create all these negative experiences for me, or just I don't want the money, right? It's just like, even though I say I want it, I'm going to do everything I can to actually kind of avoid having to go there. And then that's where that hiding coping mechanism comes in. And what we really want is we want that sweet spot in the middle, right? Which is that like I can be very clear about like what it is it that I'm meant to be generating for myself, or my mission or my organization. And how do we go about it in a way that isn't all of those negative connotations and negative experiences, either from the past or, from experience of someone that you know, or wherever the stories originally came from.
Right. So I hear you say the story. And I, often with entrepreneurs, we get this certain story in our mind, usually you're younger, really about success, what success looks like, or about money. Some people have heard the story from their parents, oh, money doesn't grow on trees.
Right.
Then there are other people who in business, dealing with other people, and they say it's a dog eat dog world. Like you got to do whatever it takes to become successful. And so in our personal lives, when we have all these things in our mind and we go through therapy, some therapists, they'll take you back to when you're in the womb almost. But then there are other people like, I don't care what happened when you were in the third grade, put all that behind you. This is what you need to do. What
Yeah,
is your approach in helping people? Because I don't know what you call it, but I see this as healing, because these are like
yeah,
blockages or mindsets that we heal in order
yeah.
for us to really believe that we can be happy and we can be successful.
Absolutely. I really agree with you on that. I do really see, I like to refer to it as your money story, right? And I do really see, by being willing to proactively engage in your money story, to get clear about what are the limiting beliefs or, generational threads that might be contributing to your current money story, and then to make some choices about like, well, what part of what's been handed to me do I want to keep? What part do I want to let go? And I get to choose that, right? Like I have divine free will, I have privilege of agency. I can change this story. Now, that's easier said than done. And I think you used a really powerful word, which is healing, right? And healing is a process. So, each of us, we need to decide like, do I want to go through this process? Is it important enough to me? I know I can personally speak to making this decision, committing to changing the story, and the recognition that that's a choice that I have to make over and over and over again to, break the generational legacy that was handed down to me. But it's changed my whole life, truly. And I definitely see the intersection with learning and understanding that I'm a highly sensitive person. So I would not trade that healing for anything in the world. So again, personal choice though, right?
Yes, we all have personal choices. So we'll continue to be highly sensitive. It's just how we adapt in the world. What are some
Oh,
strategies or techniques that you can give to entrepreneurs or business owners who themselves, we definitely recommend they take your assessment, but who themselves feel they might be highly sensitive?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I so appreciate first that you said like we're gonna be highly sensitive. And I really appreciate that because that is true, right? It's like it does go back to it's how your nervous system is wired. It sounds so simple, but it's actually like really important to acknowledge because it's not something you can get over, it's not something you can fix. It's not something you can try to pretend that you're not. Like your nervous system is wired the way that your nervous system is wired. However, you can change the way that you manage it.
Mhm.
So, everything that I teach in the highly sensitive leadership training programs is all about that. It's all about like tools and teachings and trainings of how to work with your nervous system differently within the way that you set up your business, with the way that you run your business, with the choices that you make when it comes to marketing, to selling, to operations, all of it. So, first and foremost, again, I think you just made such a great point. You are highly sensitive. Then from there, it's like, well, what's the choice that you want to make? Do you want to just stay in those coping mechanisms of pushing, hiding, and combo plattering? Or do you want to start change? So the process of change so that you can shift into creating and creating in a way that works for you. If your choice is to do that, then part of that choice is also the willingness to do things differently. So the way that you show up in your business, because you're up 20%, is going to look different than a lot of other people who are in same kind of business as you. And so that also has to be a choice. And here's probably where I would also just briefly mention that if you're not highly sensitive, if you're a person who's listening and you're not highly sensitive, what I want to bet is that there's probably somebody on your team or in your life who is. So that's also a decision is are you willing to acknowledge that there are probably some people, again, in your world in some way, we are 1 in 5. And are you going to be willing to not try to have everyone be like you, but instead be able to, really call upon the uniqueness and the, very kind of, certain talents, right, or gifts that we as highly sensitives possess. If it's you, then making a choice to really use those gifts. And if it's somebody else in your life, making a choice to welcome their different perspective.
Oh, I love it. That is fantastic. When you were speaking, what I heard was marketing. I heard a whole lot of information. It's great, but I'm like, marketing? She said marketing. Everything in my belief comes down to marketing. Marketing is the be all, end all. But how would someone who is highly sensitive market as opposed to someone who isn't? Is it their marketing style? Like for me, I believe that everyone loves a heartwarming story, a human interest story. I'm
So
like,
true.
people are moved by their emotions, people are moved by their feelings. And then you have some other people who are like, nah, sex sells. So is that part of the difference?
Well, I think you did kind of just give an example of maybe somebody who's highly sensitive. It's all about the story and the relationships, right? And then maybe somebody who's not so much. It's like just go to the sex bottom line.
Out to
Um,
it,
so,
yes.
so I would say, sure, that's a great example, but it's also about the ways that you choose to market. Right. So
Okay.
I know, for example, like when I was first starting out, and again, I didn't know that I was highly sensitive. And I was also brand new to business because I came from being a classroom high school teacher. So I was just kind of doing what I was told, right? I like went to the business conferences, I hired the coaches, I was learning, feet on the ground when it came to marketing. And at that time, like online launches were the thing, right? And like these really like intricate, complicated launches and bringing people into as many people as you possibly could, like into a free class or a free presentation, a free webinar. And I did all of that and I was successful to some degree and literally took the life out of me. And I
Mm.
would be like, wow, like what's wrong with me? Because I would look at colleagues who were doing the same thing and they would be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like we just did this launch and I'm like ready to party and I'm flying to Aruba. And I was like, I'm literally on the floor. Like I have a migraine. I like haven't eaten for, it was just not good. So that's like an example, right? So I had to be like, okay, like this way of marketing works for a lot of other people and great, good, but it doesn't work for me. So
Mhm.
what would work for me and what is my measure of an end result that's successful that might look different than doing a launch and trying to reach as many people as possible. So I had to like really, I had to dig deep and I had to be like, yeah, you know what? That's not what success is for me and I'm not willing to market like that. So let's find another way.
And which way did you find?
Yeah. Well, I think like what you spoke to about stories is really key as highly sensitive people. One of our strengths is that we're really deep listeners, we're deep
Mhm.
feelers, we're deep thinkers, and that tends to make us really good at intimate relationships, which is also why we're excellent service-based entrepreneurs. So I really called upon that. And I was like, you know what? Like, I do really well when I'm one on one with someone.
Mhm.
So rather than all of this hoopla to get as many people as possible, I was like, let me get really, really clear about who I want to connect with. And let me be willing to, get on the phone with them, have a conversation with them, show up on video with them, meet with them in person, back in the day. And that was really what just made all the difference for me. I was like, I'm totally enjoying this. Like, I'm really, really, this is like my wheelhouse. And yeah, great. And then I can really help and serve and support people. And I'm really all about like real long-term relationships and tracking work and transformation over time. So I reconfigured my business to be about that rather than these kind of flash in the pan offers that came with these big launches. And, that's just kind of one example, but a good example of what I did instead.
I love it. I love it. And the reason I do is because I'm just listening to you and I'm just imagining how I am when I'm scrolling through social media and I'll see some of these guys. You need 5 million followers. If you want to get 5 million followers, if you need 10 million followers, then this is what you have to do. And they give you this whole plan. I'm like, you know what? That looks like too much work. I don't want to do all of that. I am more just like you. I think we're twins in a different life, but I love the one-on-one connection. So with that, my
Yeah.
next question is, what is your favorite social media platform? And before you answer that, because this is one of those questions where people always disagree with me, always. They're like, always. And all the experts and all the top people, like, you gotta be on every social media platform and you gotta
Okay.
be here and you gotta do this and you gotta do that. And I'm not on LinkedIn at all. Like, I've been on LinkedIn, I've deleted it twice because I don't like superficial conversations. And I don't like every 5 seconds somebody sending me an inbox message with I don't even know who they are, but they're like, let's meet at 12 so I can tell you about my business. And I'm like, but I don't even know you. I
Mhm.
don't like TikTok because I don't like all these little silly little things. Like, I'm very serious, as you can tell.
Mhm.
But I do Instagram because I love photos, but I do the
Mhm.
majority of my conversations on Facebook, on my Facebook page. And I've built, years, and people are like, no, it doesn't matter. You have to be on all the social media platforms. What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, I love this conversation. I think it's such an important conversation to be having, especially now. So, yeah. So, first of all, social media is way more complex than it sounds like a lot of people are trying to make it, right? It's really changed over the years. And I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. Sometimes when I tell people, like, yeah, when I started my business, there was no social media.
Right,
People are like,
right.
what? What are you saying? And I was like, it's true. Like, which is crazy to me, but this is like my 20th year of being self-employed. And when I started, there was no YouTube and there was
Right.
no other social channels, right? So like, call me crazy, but we actually had to talk to each other. Like we had to talk to people.
Like they still do that. They used to do that. Like we used to have conversations.
Right. I know, exactly. So, and Facebook, let's just talk about Facebook for a second, is so different than when it first started, right? Like these platforms have been shifting and changing and like introducing new algorithms and, new ways of being like structured and like all happening so fast. So I, first of all, don't believe that anyone has the ability to say, oh, this is how you have to use or how you should be using social media. Maybe when it first started, there was a lot out there when Facebook like first went from being a social connection to really being used for marketing, and that did happen quite quickly. Yeah, okay, because it was small, right? It was contained. But then it like just really quickly grew. We had, Twitter, then we had Instagram, and then there's Snapchat, and there's TikTok, and there's LinkedIn, and there's just more and more and more. And Twitter is not even called Twitter anymore. It's just so complex. So I just don't think there's any way, again, anyone can say, oh, this is how you have to use or should be using social media. I think instead it's more of exactly what you naturally did for yourself, which is to make a choice. And it's like, well, where do I enjoy, quote unquote, hanging out? Right? Like, what is it that really works for me? And let me be clear about why that's what really works for me. And then use that. Right. So you're not going to find me on Twitter, which is now that was like 1 second. I like went on, I was like, Threads, same thing. I was on there for like 1 second. I'm like, okay, I'm totally overwhelmed. Like I'm out. There's just lots of options, lots of choices. So know what works for you, know why it works for you, and give your attention and energy there rather than trying to pretend to be somebody that you're not. Use the platforms in a way that's not a fit for you, or try to be on all of them. I mean, that's just crazy and ridiculous. Like we have work to do. We can't just be on social media. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yes. The first one that I felt that about was Twitter. I canceled my Twitter account prior to canceling my LinkedIn account. And that's because I was like, I am not going to sit here all day just giving my opinion on the world, like writing it down. But that's because I love to talk. I tell people all the time, I was blessed with at least 2 gifts, the gift of gab and the gift of manifestation, which means I can talk you out of your money. But I'm not going to type it. I'm not going to tweet it. I'm not going to write it. I'm not going to debate it. I'm just going to tell you the story. And that's it.
And here you are, right? Like on a platform that's so good for you. Great, good. Build on that, right? Understand it, like I said, and then you're able to maximize it. And, and for me too, because again, I like having like deep, intimate conversations. So podcasts work really well for me. Video interviews work really well for me. I like getting to know other people. I like hearing people's ideas. I don't have to leave my home. I used to give like big presentations when I first started out, and I would literally like be in the bathtub with a washcloth over my eyes for hours afterwards. But at that time, we were like, nope, you have to be speaking in person and you have to speak to as many people as possible. And no, you don't.
Right. I think that you can just make your own rules and you can find out what works for you. I think that's amazing. But if someone doesn't know if they are highly sensitive, can you tell us a little bit? I want to go back a little bit to your assessment. Can you tell us about that again, please, Heather?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, my assessment, which is for highly sensitive entrepreneurs and leaders, builds off of Dr. Elaine Aron's assessment, which again comes out of research from the 1990s. So first, it's about just identifying if you are a highly sensitive person. And then where my work expands upon that is, are you meant to be a highly sensitive entrepreneur or a highly sensitive leader? Or what I get a lot is people who have been in business already successfully, but they just feel like something's off, right? And then they learn that they're highly sensitive and they're like, oh, I want to learn, how do I go about doing all of this differently? And then that's where understanding if you're somewhat or if you're super or if you're super uber comes in. And along with your results from the assessment, you'll receive a free success guide, which is just some first steps to take to start to work with yourself in a different way, and then therefore be able to start to make some shifts and changes to your business structures or your organization structures. Or if you're starting out, like lucky you, set it up to work for you and your nervous system right from the get-go. Yeah.
And you'll be able to eventually, after working with you, how long is eventually? That's the thing I always ask people with courses and classes, because I'm like, can I do it in 15 minutes? If I can't do it in 15 minutes, I don't know if this program is for me. So is working with you, because I'm a business consultant, and sometimes people don't understand the difference. They like, oh, they talk to me and they say, oh, well, yeah, this is my coach and Sharifah's my coach. And I'm like, no, I'm not a coach, because coaches stay with you through the process. You talk to them every week or every month and you give them, I'm like, look, this is the things I need you to do. Go do it. When you finish it, then you come back. But I'm not a sis, I'm not a holla back girl. I'm not the sis boom ba, yay, go. Like, what is it like working with you? I need more like a general, I think,
Yeah.
a Marine. Yes.
That is so great to really just lay it out and differentiate, right? Like between a consultant or a coach. Because as I'm listening to you describe, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the exact opposite of you. I am all about process. I am all about really staying with a person, not just about oh, here's what you do, but I'm also really about, here's what you do when you resist doing what you need to do, right? Which, when we are in that transformational process of learning how to work with our nervous system, it's just natural that resistance is going to come up. One, because probably you've been doing things opposite for a very, very long time. So we've got some kind of rewiring that has to happen. And then also what happens for a lot of highly sensitive entrepreneurs and leaders when they're really learning, again, how to work with the nervous system, is they really bump up against the socialization, right? That they've been doing things opposite than how it works best for them for a long time, because a lot of us as highly sensitives, only 20% really want to be able to fit in with the other 80%. So that resistance is going to come up as well. And I'm in it for the long haul to support you and really being able to shift through that. So the leadership training programs are 1 year minimum. And I always say it takes at least that amount of time for that rewiring, because most people, by the time they come to me, again, have been working in a way that goes against their nature for 30 or more years. So I'm like, you got to give me at least a year to start to really be able to integrate and then implement ways of doing it differently that aren't just going to have you rubber banding back to doing it the ways that didn't work so well. But I will say, with the trainings that come as part of the track trainings that are part of the leadership training program, where there's individual trainings, you can probably do a lot of those in 15 minutes or less.
I like
But there's
that.
more
I like
than one.
I like that. But see, if I had you for a year, then at least I would feel that you're not going to leave me and I'm going through this transition process by myself. And that's also like, again, the opposite because I seem to go to extremes. But either I just want to do it myself or it's like, don't leave me. I'm trying to make this change. I'm trying to figure it out, but I need your help and I need your support. So it's a year, 365 days. I signed on to take the class. What are some of the things that I may expect after working with you for a year?
Yeah, for sure. You will absolutely have experienced a change in the way that you understand how your nervous system works. And you will even have a greater embodiment to have different responses. So, in the ways that your nervous system has worked against you in the past, they'll now work for you. And then, depending on which leadership track curriculum you assess into when you start the program, we have 7 different tracks of leadership curriculum. So those are tracks, everything from like marketing to visionary, that really identify where you are in the outer aspects of your experience as an entrepreneur and leader. Like, are you just starting out in business? Are you starting to leverage in your business? Or are you at a place where you're, building or growing team in a business? And your leadership curriculum matches where you're at. So at the same time that you're learning these different ways of responding and utilizing your nervous system, you're simultaneously going to be taking outer actions and making those changes about how you go about marketing or selling or operations or team building. And what I've really found is that there's really, really like a potent combination to do the inner and the outer together at the same time. If you try to focus on just the inner, which is like just that change with the nervous system, then if you wait to try to do the outer later, it becomes very hard to then like transfer, right, to those new ways of working with the nervous system. Because again, we kind of just have to keep things going on the outer level, right? And so it's going to be really hard to be like, well, this is how I've always done it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Or if you try to like do only the outer and not with the inner, that doesn't really work either. So we really look to be creating that inner and outer change simultaneously. And that's how the curriculum tracks are set up.
And that's how you get business miracles.
Yes, it is how you get business miracles. Yes. And that's only one component.
I think I need a miracle.
Say again.
I said, I need a miracle.
Yes. Well, it's so great because the miracle really comes from my experience working with the spiritual and psychological curriculum of A Course in Miracles. And in that, in that teaching, it describes miracle as a shift in perception. So that's really where the name Business Miracles came from, because when I was learning that I was highly sensitive, I was like, oh, like I need a shift in perception about like how I look at myself, how I look at being in business, how I look at what it means to be in business. I need a business miracle. And so that's what it is. And that's what we look to create for all members of the Business Miracles community.
Oh, wow. If you are just now tuning in to Ask Sharifah Videocast, you have missed out on a lot of information. Go ahead and watch this show from the top because you can learn more about being a highly sensitive entrepreneur or business owner and what our guests can do to help you. Now, Heather, we are coming down to the last few minutes of the show. And what I love to do at the end of every show is just simply allow my guests the opportunity to speak directly to the audience, to let them know what you want them to receive or take away from this show today. I'll give you a couple of seconds.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, I would just say is if you've been listening, and you have a sense that you might be a highly sensitive person, definitely take the assessment, find out for sure, and then my invitation is that you're willing to begin to engage in what I refer to as the real work, which is that transformational process to first know yourself as a person who's highly sensitive, to then embrace yourself as a person who's highly sensitive, and then be willing to step into doing things differently as a person who's highly sensitive. And that doesn't mean that you need to make less or receive less. It's just that you'll go about it in a different way where actually you're able to have more, make more of an impact, make more income with a greater sense of peace, and a lot less effort. And then if you've been listening and you started to think like, oh, there might be somebody in my life or my team who's highly sensitive, invite them to take the assessment. And just, my deep request would be, and be willing to consider the possibility that they have something different to offer, even though they're different than you.
I love it. Not everyone's the same. They may be different, but where can people find more information about you?
Absolutely. So that assessment that we've been talking about, as well as a lot of other available resources, you'll find at www.businessmiracles.com, businessmiracles.com.
Yes, you heard it here. Heather Dominick is joining us from businessmiracles.com. You want to go to the website, check it out, make sure you take the assessment, or maybe you know someone who you think they should take the assessment. It doesn't matter. Anyone can take the assessment. It will help everyone to improve. Heather, I want to thank you for being a guest on today's episode of Ask Sharifah Videocast.
Thank you so much. I've loved our conversation.
You are so welcome. I want to thank you all for tuning in to today's episode, because you, the viewer, are the one who makes the show what it is. If you want to be a guest on Ask Sharifah Videocast, please visit the website at AskSharifah.com. Until next time, everyone have a safe and a blessed day. Bye now.